Hello, and welcome to a Postdocs Journal, the show that takes you through my journey into and eventually out of academia as a postdoctoral research scientist. My name is Simit Patel. Hello, thank you very much for joining me. A very warm welcome back to those of you who may have listened to the show before, and a nice warm welcome to those of you who may be listening for the very first time. If you don't already know, this podcast is based on my own personal private journal. In each episode, I read out a journal entry from about 12 years ago when I was working in academia as a postdoc. Then I reflect on it, I analyze it, I try to make sense of it, and share my thoughts with you today with the benefits of 12 years of hindsight. If you are a student or a postdoc or just an early career academic, or you're just struggling in academia, or you may not be in academia at all and you're just someone who can relate to things like imposter syndrome, loneliness, and mental health issues in the workplace, I hope that by sharing my own personal experience with you, that helps you to feel a little bit less alone. In today's episode, we jump to just after Christmas in 2013, coming up to the end of the second year of my postdoc. This will actually be the last episode of a Postdocs Journal Season 1. I've decided to split this podcast into 2 seasons, mainly because I just want to make it a bit more manageable for me, but also because I think this is a really good stopping off point. As much as I love to do this podcast, it has been hundreds of hours of work to get it to this point. So I do need a small break in order to get ready to deliver Season 2 for you. Season 1 has very much covered the beginning and the middle of my postdoc, and I guess Season 2 will cover the middle and the end of my postdoc and my eventual exit from academia altogether. I'm also going to try to put out 1 or 2 bonus episodes in the off-season when I find the time. So make sure you are subscribed or you're following on whichever app you normally listen to your podcasts on, so you don't miss anything. It's been a while since I've done one of my big gushy thank yous to everyone who's supported me in this podcast so far, so that's long overdue. I want to say a massive thank you to those of you listening to the show, and I want to say a special thank you to those of you who have taken the time to reach out to me to tell me what you think of the show and for sharing a little bit of your stories as well. I really value that sense of connection that brings me, and it's motivated me to keep going. So thank you very much. Okay, back to today's episode. In this journal entry, I had spent the Christmas in the UK, and I was at Heathrow Airport getting ready to fly back to Germany. I think the change of scenery did me some good to get out of Frankfurt for a while, and I was making some surprising connections between my postdoc and my childhood. So have a listen to the reading now, and I'll be back at the end to share some thoughts with you after 12 years of hindsight. Enjoy. December 27th, 2013. Christmas break is over. I had one interesting thought about career stuff and my lack of publication output. How could I have actually published anything this year? There was just too much lab work to do on the snail project. I was never lazy with any of it. I threw myself into it and I did what I needed to do. Did I create too much work for myself? Should I have cut more corners and compromised the quality? Maybe. Between that and the fish project, which was very spontaneous and I worked unbelievably efficiently on it, there wasn't actually ever any time or an opportunity for me to have actually written and published anything. I really tried my hardest. It's so disheartening to know that it wasn't enough. Even after reflecting on it, I still can't make sense of what my problem is. I suppose deep down, I just don't know what I'm doing. I've never actually done it before. I've never really taken a project all the way to the end and have it fully published and complete. No one ever really showed me how. But what can I actually do about that? I can remember when I was 6 years old in year 2. I was taking so much longer than anyone else to get the work done. And I wasn't misbehaving or anything, I was just a bit slow. We were writing stories or something, and I remember being singled out and told to go to my desk before everyone else after morning registration on the carpet, because I needed extra time to finish my story because I was just so damn slow. I can remember in year 4 my teacher would punish me by making me miss break time for not getting my work done. And she would blame me for it for not making enough effort. But it wasn't my fault. I was concentrating well and I tried really hard to understand what we had to do. For some reason I just didn't understand it and I was just being slow. 20 plus years later and it still feels like the same fucking problem, me being too slow. I should try and look forward to what I want to achieve in 2014. With work, in January and mid-February, I should be finished with the snail project and the paper writing. Then I'll go back onto the fish project, I guess. I need to get one more population pair, and then aim to get the paper published by the end of the year. Or maybe I should take what I have and write a grant proposal instead. I should try to do one conference this year as well, but what should I present? The snail project feels a little cheap. It's not really my work. The former master's student did most of the work. I don't really feel like taking credit for it at a conference. So maybe attending a smaller workshop would be a better option, where I can show off my half-baked fish project instead. A workshop or conference around April would be good, so I can take time off around my birthday too. I still can't figure out what I want in terms of my career. I had hoped keeping this list of things I liked and disliked would help clarify things for me. Then I could start to think of other ways, other than academia, that I could achieve those things I want. But it really hasn't helped, not yet anyway. I would like to continue with the postdoc life for the moment, which I think suits me quite well for the foreseeable future. But I need a backup plan for the longer term. I know I don't want to be a PI or a professor. Okay, thank you very much for listening to that. As usual, I've written down some notes and some thoughts after reading that back and hearing that back. I actually felt very surprised when I read this one back for the first time. I'd completely forgotten that I had written it. I think there are lots of very juicy topics to get into here, some very deep connections to my childhood. So I'm looking forward to getting into that and analysing this one in some more detail. Before we get into the reflection, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you ever worry about your paper being rejected because the English isn't good enough? One thing I've always been good at is writing, but I know not everyone finds that easy. Perhaps English isn't your first language, or for some reason, the words you write just don't quite capture what you want to say. Good English can enhance your scientific credibility, increase the chance of your article being accepted, and speed up the peer review process. Whether you're a research scientist, a scientific writer, or part of a dynamic biotech company, I want to help you with my professional copy editing and proofreading services for scientific English. Enhancing the clarity and precision of writing has been an integral part of my professional life in academia and in the biotech industry for over a decade. If you need a native English speaker with a solid scientific background and a professional certification in proofreading to refine and polish your writing, I would love to help you. Please visit simitpatel.com, that's simitpatel.com for more information. Thank you, and now back to the show. In general, it seems like I was actually being quite kind to myself for once in this journal entry. I had a more balanced view and I was being a bit more realistic about what was possible in 2013. I even gave myself some compliments about how efficiently I worked at times, and I commented on the fact that I tried my very best. I think this speaks to how being in a different environment sometimes can really help you reflect on things in a different way. A change of environment can help you gain a different perspective on things. These days, I try to go away on like a yoga retreat or something at least once a year by myself. I take that opportunity to pause and reflect on specific things. Sometimes I get a sense of clarity from that change of environment, and I bring that good energy back into my regular life when I go back home. However, there have been lots of times where I may have an epiphany or think about things differently, and I'll feel really clear and good in my mind from that change of environment. But when I go back to my everyday life at home, I don't bring that good energy back into my life, and I just slip back into bad habits. I slip back into being stressed, and all my problems from before are still just waiting for me when I come home. In my experience, this is linked to whether you are escaping a toxic environment or not. If you take a break and you come back to a healthy environment, it's much easier to bring those epiphanies and that good energy back into your everyday life. If, however, you take a break from a stressful situation and you come back to a very toxic environment, you might actually have felt better while you were away, but it's just a matter of time before you start to feel like shit again. I don't want to give away too much from season 2, but in the case of this journal entry, I did end up going back to a very unhappy, toxic work environment. So I'm sorry to say that this little moment of clarity I had in this journal entry while I was in the UK didn't last. I pretty much, as soon as I got back to Germany, I was struggling again. So having a change of scenery is, well, it's never a bad thing, but it's not necessarily the long-term solution to any problems that you're having. If you're coming back to a toxic environment, you are coming back to a toxic environment that you don't want to be in. Despite the more rational, balanced view I was taking when assessing my performance, I was still at the stage where I thought that I was the problem. I was still doubting myself and my ability to be successful. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. Even 2 years into my postdoc, that imposter syndrome from episode 1 that I wrote about was still with me. With hindsight, I can see that a big part of why I was doubting my ability to be successful was my definition of success, which was mostly the academic definition of success, which was mainly publications, grants, etc. For some reason, I started writing about those past microtraumas from when I was back at school. Maybe it was because I was at home. I went to my hometown, probably saw some old school friends. I guess that just stirred up a lot of these sorts of memories for me. In a previous episode, I think it was episode 6, maybe episode 7, I talked about bullying and how past experiences can influence you in present day. I think this is a nice chance to revisit that idea. I can actually still remember those moments I wrote about in that journal entry from when I was 6 years old, 8 years old. I can still see the classroom, I can see the carpet where all the other kids were sitting, and I had to sit on my own at my desk to get all my work done because I was a bit slow. I can remember at the time that I was totally confused about what I was doing wrong. In some cases, I was being punished by missing break time and things just for being a bit slow on my work. I think being punished and shamed and not really understanding why can be quite damaging for a child. My inner child was hurt by being thought of as slow. I was definitely a late bloomer in my childhood. My intelligence and everything developed much later on. But I think there was some psychological damage done to me before any of that happened. And that damage somehow stayed with me during my postdoc and arguably with me today. On some level, I think this might have been part of my drive to prove myself more and to achieve more academically later on in life. I think part of me was actually angry at those teachers that made me feel bad for being a little bit slow. I think that anger fueled some of that need for me to prove myself, to prove them all wrong. When I started achieving better academically, I learned that these problems went away a little bit. I would get more praise, I would have less shaming. I learned that by achieving more academically, I was somehow worthy and more accepted. And I think that's why it might have been so triggering for me when I was getting this message that I'm somehow not worthy during my postdoc, that I'm being too slow at publishing papers, that I'm not working hard enough, that I'm not enough. When I was writing this journal entry, I was drawing a parallel between that feeling of not understanding what was wrong with me when I was a kid and not knowing what was wrong with me when I was doing my postdoc. But now that I think about it, I think there were more parallels than I initially thought. In the early 90s, when I was a kid and I was being a little bit slow with my schoolwork, I didn't have the mentorship that I needed. I guess what I really needed was someone to mentor me and to try and help figure out what I needed and provide that for me. I was just a kid. I couldn't figure that out myself. I couldn't ask for it. So I think there was a lack of mentorship back then. When I was a kid, I just assumed that there was something wrong with me and the way I was working. I learned that there was just something wrong with me, and then it was up to me to try and figure that out myself. I was just a kid, so I don't want to blame myself too much. But I don't think I made it easy for anyone to provide me with the support I needed because I didn't understand what the problem was and I couldn't ask for help on it. It's interesting to see the same theme in 2013. Fast forward to 2013 and I was writing that no one ever showed me how to do research properly, from planning, lab work, analysis, all the way through to publication. And I wrote that that's why I didn't know what I was doing. So again, there was this lack of mentorship. To be clear, I'm not blaming any of my mentors in my time in academia. Yes, I do think there were things they all could have done better, but that's not my point. My point is, I think I never learned how to have a good relationship with a mentor. So I wasn't able to form that sort of relationship with any of my mentors later on in life. That's just a life skill I never learned early on. I've always had people available, supervisors, bosses, teachers, lecturers, etc., but I never learned how to have that relationship with any of them to get the support that I needed. I would also like to point out that my goal setting skills are slightly improving here. Back in episode 8, I think, at the end of 2012, I demonstrated some terrible goal making skills in that journal entry. My goals are still quite vague in this journal entry, but they have improved slightly by being a bit more specific and having more realistic timelines. Still had some way to go, but they were improving. In terms of my career choices, I was still a little bit lost at this point in terms of what I wanted, but I did make some progress. I said that I didn't want to be a professor or a PI in the long term. I'd pretty much decided at this point that leaving academia was the best option for me. Probably wasn't willing to admit that or say that out loud, certainly not to any of my colleagues, but certainly reading this journal entry, that's how I felt deep down. And that's still real progress. I may not have figured out what I wanted to do, but knowing what you don't want to do is just an important milestone. If I had it my way, though, I would have actually stayed as a postdoc as long as I wanted to, so that I could give myself the time that I needed to develop as a scientist at my own pace. But remember, at this point, I still had this fixed-term contract hanging over my head. I was still making plans for the end of 2014. I was planning on publishing a paper by then, but as far as I knew, I only had a 5-month contract that would take me to July 2014. That's what I knew for sure. So I was still in this sort of uncertain phase of knowing or not knowing how long I was going to be around and how much time I had available to me. I think what I really needed at this point was to be given, say, a 3-year contract with some reassurance that I can take all the time I needed to develop as a scientist at my own pace. Sadly, opportunities like that just do not exist in academia. So there you have it. We've reached the end of this episode, the end of the 2nd year of my postdoc, and the end of season 1 of A Postdoc's Journal. I've really enjoyed doing episodes like this one in particular, where I get to delve deep into some inner child work. There's something very healing about that. Today in 2025, I've recently started seeing a new therapist, and I would like to focus a lot more on inner child work. So I'm really happy to be ending on an episode that's along that theme. If you haven't already subscribed or followed or liked or whatever my feed, please do. As I said earlier, I will be posting some bonus content in the off season, so make sure you don't miss any of that. If you have any questions or you need any help or support navigating your own postdoc journey, then please let me know. LinkedIn is really the best way to reach me, but I'm also available on Instagram and Blue Sky. All my contact info is in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was valuable for you in some way. Until next time, please be kind to yourself.
Brood about it, brood until the day, one day I will find the words to say.
Thanks again for listening to A Postdocs Journal. I've been your host, Semit Patel. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others who you think might find it helpful and interesting. You could also leave a review over at Podchaser or on Apple Podcasts. If you can relate to anything in this episode, or if you have your own take on this journal entry, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Blue Sky. Links to all my social media are in the show notes. Thanks again.